Hey everybody, welcome to Performance Anxiety. We're doing a special edition of Side Projects. I'm your host, Mark, and I wanted to thank our sponsor, AKG, for sending us their Podcaster Essentials kit. It's got a great Lyra mic and amazing headphones. If you've ever thought about doing your own podcast, this is the best, most affordable way to get into it. Reifel returns with a menu based on a playlist sent to him by yours truly. There were no parameters other than to use a minimum of 3 songs. Jay reached into his historical bag of tricks and came up with a menu based on an event hosted by Roman Emperor Domitian called the Black Dinner, or alternately the Dinner from Hell. Every course he served was black. In addition, the senators in attendance didn't know if they would even survive the meal, literally. And let's give a shout out to Apicius while we're at it. So follow Jay at Reifel and at Edible History. Check out other historical menus at ediblehistorynyc.com. Follow us at Performance ANX on social media. And you can pick up a cup of coffee for us at ko-fi.com/performanceanxiety. Merch is available at performanceanx.threadless.com. And check out all the other great podcasts on our home, the Pantheon Podcast Network. Podcasts like Highway Hi-Fi. That show always makes me laugh. Between the subject matter and the dry sense of humor, it's just a great show. So belly up and check out the soundtrack to The Black Dinner with Jay Reifel on Performance Anxiety, part of the Pantheon Podcast Network.
How's it going, man?
Good. How you doing?
Pretty good. A lot of stupid work and some not stupid work, but mostly stupid.
Tell me about it. Unfortunately, you're in an industry where you get to be a little more creative than me, though.
You don't actually understand what I do for a living.
No, I don't.
I do. I sneak off into the corner and get to work on my creative stuff, and in the meantime, I make things happen.
Make a bunch of burgers for ball players.
Actually, yes. Yeah. Frankly, that's what I do.
You can have all these wonderful things. What would you like? A burger.
That's true. I mean, whatever. It is what it is. We cook nice food. They're happy. Everybody's happy.
It's got to be an interesting environment. It's not everybody gets to do that. So
true. So, you sent me a list of songs.
Yes, I did.
A long list, and I chose 9 out of 20.
Yes.
And then I composed a menu inspired by the tonality of the songs you gave me, and I can explain my logic.
Yes, I think we're going to have to, because I don't even know how to explain the whole concept. I sometimes I just get these ridiculous ideas in my head, like if I was going to do this, what would the music version of this be? So that's why I thought when I had you on and we recorded your first episode, I thought this is the guy I need to talk to, because he's got some interesting stuff going on. So for the listeners, the whole premise is a musical menu. And I think I inadvertently influenced the menu by choosing and making the playlist that I did. And I chose a lot of heavy music because when we did the last episode, we're talking about music and, on and off mic. And you'd mentioned that you liked heavy music. So when you agreed to do this episode, I'm like, okay, let me send him some interesting heavy stuff. And I tried, I don't want to say, it didn't start off this way. I ended up using a lot of music from former podcast guests. And it didn't start off that way because the first song I put on there was a band called Hes Foreign, who I did reach out to, and they have declined my invitation to be on the podcast. But who knows? Maybe after this they'll reconsider. So,
yeah, I'm starting with them, so maybe they'll change their mind, and if not, I'll write them out.
So I hope that I didn't have any undue influence on the menu by choosing so many heavy songs. I did try to lighten it up with some. So,
I think it worked out really, really well. I mean, I messed around for a while, and then it snapped into a real inspiration. So I'm going to call this a really inspired, questionable idea.
Okay. So you mentioned that there is an overall theme of the menu based on a historical menu. So can you give me an explanation of that?
So I was listening to various songs. They were kind of heavy and somewhat kind of dirgy, and there was a lot of different stuff. And particularly, like, I kind of selected the stuff that resonated with me. And I'd heard one or two of these bands, but I hadn't heard these songs, so it was kind of fun. I'm a little bit of a stick in the mud sometimes about new music. So I'm just some old guy. What do you know? Edit that out in your podcast. I'm young and virile.
Exactly. It's all audio. Nobody knows anything.
There's actually a dinner that we at Edible History riff on sometimes, and I've done like a riff on it. And so there's nothing better or worse, depending on your point of view, than a mad Roman emperor with a sense of humor. There have been several. So, and one was a dude named Domitian. He's a cool dude. And he had this very famous dinner that is alternately referred to as the Black Dinner or the Dinner from Hell.
Okay.
And to give you a little bit of context of other Roman emperors with a sense of humor who had dinners, there was an emperor who invited a large number of guests to a dinner and drowned them in rose petals. Oh. And I'd like you to think about the mechanics of this for a moment, because, like, that's a lot of rose petals.
Yes.
I mean, that's farms upon farms of rose petals, and I'm not exactly sure what the backstory is. There is, like, some reasonable historical precedence for this. This did probably happen. You know, I don't know whether it was a glut in the rose petal market, and he was like, well, I have these 6 to 8 tons of rose petals that no one knows what to do with, and these guests, and I don't like them, and, you know, so there was that. And then there's stuff like, in the middle of a dinner, you release the jackals and hyenas onto your guests.
Wow.
Which totally happened. And no, this is the good part. Oh. So this is, once again, we're talking about sensitive humor here. So the jackals and hyenas were tame.
Okay.
But the guests did not know that.
Oh.
So they were, for a reasonable period of time, absolutely convinced they were going to be devoured alive by jackals and hyenas. First of all, this man had access to large numbers of tame jackals and hyenas, which is, you know, it's good to be a Roman emperor sometimes.
Mel Brooks was right, man. It is good to be king.
It's good to be the king. Yeah, he was not wrong. So there's a number of examples such as these that we're working on. So the Black Dinner, Domitian invited a number of guests to a dinner. And invited is a term, but it's like you're not going to say, no, Emperor Domitian, I will not be attending your dinner.
I've got plans.
Yeah, exactly. No, you had to show up. So everybody showed up, and everyone was attended by a beautiful boy page, and somber music was playing, and they were served many courses of food, all of which was black, while dirgy music played in the background.
Oh my gosh.
And we'll find out how it ended at the end, but I'm not going to tell you now how it ended.
Okay. So, can I ask a question? And maybe,
yes,
maybe you will answer this as we go. Maybe it's something that you can't answer right now without giving it away. But either way, I'm fine. How was everything blackened? Was it blackened by adding something while it was cooking, or was it blackened with dyes afterwards?
Short answer, I'm not 100% sure, but actually in my new cookbook, there is a whole sidebar on exactly this.
Oh,
and
cool.
certain things were probably cooked with squid ink, which is a traditional way. Even like in modern Italian food, you'll see squid ink pasta.
Yes.
Often, and like in the very fine dining world, for a while there was a thing where people were doing blackened stuff with plant ashes, like leek ashes, were like super hip for a second, and they're actually really good. I used to make here's a funny story. I used to make this amazing sauce that I had at this restaurant in Mexico City that it's made with charred. I usually use serrano peppers, and I told my friend I made this amazing sauce with serrano peppers and black garlic and blah, 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 and whatever. And I gave him the recipe, and he tried to duplicate the sauce, but he's like, I'm going to make it, really good, and I'm going to make it with habaneros. And so what you do is you put them in a 500-degree oven, and you absolutely carbonize them. You turn them to carbon. Oh, wow. But of course, at the same time, you take all the capsaicin oil, and then which basically aerosolizes. And he opened his oven and was basically pepper sprayed. Oh. And like, he was absolutely crippled. I'm like, you're a crazy person. Why, I said serranos, but whatever. So. But yeah, there are various uses of ash, to darken stuff. When I have done dishes from the black dinner, I usually use a commercial gel dye, which is just black. And the only thing that's funny is that commercial black dyes are actually super dark green dyes. Oh. So everyone who ate the dinner, and I know a couple people because they mentioned it to me, totally pooped green the next day. So that was awesome too.
That is awesome.
But no, it's not actually known how they blackened the food. And also, like, when you look at a lot of historical cuisine, you'll often realize that stuff that they say is red or green is not, it's like they'll often call it, like, if you look at a very popular medieval sauce, a sauce carmeline, because it was red, it's red because it has a ton of like red wine vinegar and cinnamon in it. So I've made it, and it's ochre or pink, or like, you would never think of it in a modern sense as red. Okay. But they called it. So it's unclear how black the food actually was. It's not unclear that they were terrified out of their minds, which is totally awesome. So I took the musical cues and I created my version of the dinner from Apicius, which is the world's oldest full cookbook, a cookbook that's actually a large collection of recipes. It was probably originally written 1st century BCE. Oh, wow. And it's cobbled together. It has recipes from across the Roman Empire, often regional, but like there's Greek recipes and there's a lot of Roman recipes, and there's some that are like, Lucanian sausages, which are actually still a thing. Like they still make, which is like, it's a province, I forget where, it might be Dalmatia or somewhere, but I'm going to get that wrong and somebody's going to like Twitter me or something.
I don't think anybody's going to know that one.
I don't know everything, but well, there's probably people it's probably still called that, and people live there. They're like, we don't live there, we live here.
I don't know how many Lucasians listen to the podcast, but
this is also an issue.
I would like to be the number one podcast there, so
yes, we'll work on that.
I'll be tagging them judiciously in everything here. So, all right. Well,
so cool.
Why don't we let's get started? So you mentioned the first course is
the first course was indeed Holy Fawn, actually. Holy Fawn, you should now be on his podcast. Because you're cool, and I really like the song. It has a really slow intro, and then it gets really heavy, and it's medium long, and just sets this tone of like, oh, this cannot possibly be good.
Right.
which I really liked. And I started the dinner with spiced honeyed wine, because that is the way you would start any traditional Roman multi-course dinner back in the day. And this was a wine that was sweetened with honey and spices, and there's an extremely honeyed version, which is called like the honey drink for travelers, because you're tired and you need some gulps of honey, I guess. No, it actually makes sense. There's just like a ton of quick energy and stuff, but this was like a very traditional, and like there's a recipe in the cookbook, and it's really quite delicious. I mean,
so it's the early Red Bull.
Very sweet. Yeah, it's an early Red Bull. It's like a super, it's like a super sweet. It's like a dessert wine, but it's like if you were starting dinner with a glass of really good port. Okay. Which is how everyone should start dinner, frankly.
I like that. I'll be used to ending dinner with that. I'm going to have to start dinner with it.
Yes. It awakens stuff. And there's this whole, I'm not going to torture with this really complex ideas of humoral medicine, where like food adjusted your internal humors, and that's how you kept yourself healthy. And it actually, I mean, like funny things, like the reason you still have a cheese plate at the end of a dinner actually has to do with these ideas about humoral medicine that go back solidly 2,000 years. But like that so that was how I started the dinner. And I like to imagine for a moment that there's, you're a group of Roman senators, and you're sitting in the Dominion, the emperor is reclining on his couch with his extremely beautiful page, and the somber music is playing, and you're just like, oh yes, let's just try to get through this meal. let's just hope that everything will turn out really well.
Maybe things will pick up.
Yeah,
as we go along.
But no, the next black dish comes out. And the second song was Catatonia.
Yes. Follower by Catatonia. So the first course was Darkstone by Holy Fawn.
Yes.
The second course is Follower by Catatonia.
Yeah, which also has it starts to this really nice kind of driving bass line, and I felt like it really moved the dinner forward. It's like, it's okay, now we're moving, we're in motion. It gets pretty heavy, but in, not in a super aggressive way. Still in a kind of like, we're just moving forward. It's like a freight train. It's just taking you to a place you may not want to go.
Gathering momentum for better or worse.
Exactly.
Okay.
So the dish I did for this, because I think it's a really nice starter, is a dish that I love the title, because the title is Peas, Supreme Style. It's often just dish of peas. And this is actually one of the most sophisticated and interesting dishes, like maybe in all of like this era. And this is 2,000 years old, so of Roman cuisine. And it's something like a classical terrine. Okay. And a terrine is like some kind of layered or baked, often a force meat, often like ground up meat, like a liver or ground up pork, something. But this is a huge number of layers. So what it is you're taking leeks and small game birds and peas, of course, and toasted pine nuts, and actually Lucanian sausages, as we mentioned, which are made in a different recipe. And you're cooking all these things separately in a spiced broth, right? So you cook them all separately, And then you take a mold or a square, deep square plate, like a loaf pan or whatever, and you put in caul fat. And caul fat is this webbed fat netting that encloses the internal organs of animals. If anyone on the podcast is a fan of old school Iron Chef, like Japanese Iron Chef,
yes,
you used to see it all the time. Like, oh, he's pulling out the fat netting. Right? Okay. And it's terrifying. It's ultra thin. It looks like a thin brain case. It is just this weird membranous fat netting. It's terrifying. It's disgusting. It's so metal. So you line the interior of the tureen pan, with the fat netting. Okay. And then you put the pine nuts in, and then you put a layer of peas, and you put a layer of game birds, and you put a layer of poached leeks, and you put a layer of sausages, and you put a layer of poached bacon, and you put a layer of peas, and a layer of game birds, and a pair of leeks, and a pair of poached sausages, and you keep building it up. And then you fold the brain-like monstrosity of the fat netting around it. I mean, this is also, you see this in classical French cuisine. It's called crepinette because that fat netting in French is called crepine. And then you bake it in the oven so everything cooks together and the fat netting browns, Wow. And then you turn it over and you decant it. And if you look at my Instagram, I have a really amazing picture of it. And then you actually make this sauce, which is like egg yolks and white wine and more pine nuts and some spices. And it's just incredibly sophisticated. I mean, this is a very complex recipe that has a lot of steps, is technically demanding, and has its own sauce for it. And it's solidly at least 2,000 years old. And it's kind of mind blowing.
Have you made this?
I have.
Wow.
Yeah, check out my Instagram. There's a sick picture of it.
So
and it is in my cookbook, which you can buy in 2 years. So,
and I will be
such is the publishing industry.
Yeah, unfortunately, and I will probably be asking you that question for every single one of these because.
I will just, it'll actually be pretty obvious which ones I've made and which ones I haven't.
All right.
Although there's a couple that are like maybe here. So that's a second course.
So that's a second course, yeah.
There are 9 courses, by the way. You sent me 20 songs and I did 9 courses. So,
yes. And you were free to do as many as you want. So
right.
I said at least 3 courses, but as many as you like. So
if we ever do this again, we'll do Versailles and I'll do 14.
Ooh.
Then you'll have to send me like 50 songs. So
yeah, no kidding.
Take me longer. And haven't got to that chapter yet.
Maybe. All right, cool.
All right, so the third course is actually an homage to you because you spoke so highly of Black Rebel Motorcycle Club, and I'm like, so I have to work them in somewhere.
Thank you.
And I actually really like this song. This song is Carried from the Start.
Yes, off their latest.
And
which is like
I also
2 years
really
old.
like the opening lyric, which is like, oh my God, I can't read my handwriting.
There's no one ready for this.
There's no one ready for this. Yes.
There's no one ready for this, and for this our calls are all faded into shadow. There's no one waiting on this, and all this what calls us all left us from the start. Take what you want, take what you need, you take all till all can't breathe. There's no one ready for this, before this what called us all, left us in the shadows. There's no more waiting for this, and for this what calls us all, tears us all apart.
I'm like reading it, like I actually didn't have the word no there, so it made no sense at all. There's no one ready for this, and it repeats that lyric in this really nice way, like, and then it builds that lyric to the beginning of the next line. I just thought it was like a really nice way to put a lyric together. it's still, I wanted to keep this idea of like, you have to go back to these senators who are waiting and they're thinking like, where is this dinner going? And this is the next song. And I did a course, which is actually interesting. It's called Tramalcios Pig. And it's, in a sense, it's apocryphal. It's from the Satyricon by Petronius, which is it's one of the earliest novels. It's a satirical novel. It doesn't all exist. So this is actually, and there's a very famous scene that involves Tramalcio, who is, you have to think of him as like a kind of douchey nouveau riche Roman, right? And this is kind of a send-up. So this whole feast is a send-up of nouveau riche Romans. And I can't remember if I talked about this before. You have to understand that Romans, they did this really funny thing that, because like Romans had this idea of themselves as like, we are the conquerors of the world. We're this tough, martial people. But the problem is when you're so powerful, you end up being incredibly wealthy, and then they could have all this cool stuff, and then they would worry that this cool stuff was making them weak.
Right.
So then they would pass laws against their cool stuff. And like they would pass these things called sumptuary laws, where they would like prohibit private ownerships of fish ponds and wearing certain kinds of clothes and how many courses you could have in a meal.
Oh, wow.
So Tramalcio's feast is kind of a send-up of these like nouveau riche. This is a newly rich trading Roman, and he has this very elaborate, like ridiculous meal that just sounds totally amazing, frankly. One day I will recreate the whole thing, but a very famous thing. So his cook comes up with this, some jacket is calling me. His cook presents this large roasted pig, and he starts to serve the pig out to everyone. And the intestines of the pig spill out onto the table. And everybody's like, dude, your chef doesn't know how to gut a pig. What's wrong with this guy? And Tramalcio is like, no problem. I will execute him, or I will at least beat him to death in front of you. And the chef goes, no, wait, I will gut it for you right now. Just give me one moment. Just wait 1 second. And it's all a ruse, you see. It's a joke. And actually, he stuffed the pigs with sausages. And I actually like to do this. I make a freestanding pig, and I stuff the sausages in the belly of the pig, and I roast the whole thing. And I slit it open in front of people, and the sausages fall out, and a good time is had by all.
Oh, that is awesome.
And the sausages I used for our current example, which I have made, although I've actually never stuffed them inside a pig, I use different sausages for that, are a blood sausage with pine nuts.
Oh, wow.
Which is actually totally delicious. I once served this with oysters and a cumin sauce, which actually occurs later in this menu, and they're really great. I mean, I think blood sausages are one of the things that are like, they seem gross, but they're actually quite wonderful. They're quite delicate. These have it's funny, they have an ingredient which is called screw pine essence, basically, or fresh screw pine.
Okay.
Which, it's really funny. I had to do all this research trying to figure out what it was, and then my Indian food guru, who's an enormous Scottish man, who's teaching robots to cook. I kid you not. Oh, wow. He's amazing. My friend John, he's totally amazing. And he's like, oh, it's Kawa water. Duh. And it is. So it's actually an ingredient that you see quite commonly in Indian cooking today. And it's kind of piney, and it's just a weird thing. Then I went down to the Indian grocery and bought it, and there I was in Rome.
Oh my god.
Worked out really well. But it's totally cool. So
I'd have to try. I've only had blood sausage once or twice, and I think it was overcooked like profoundly. So I would be willing.
It kind of always is. I mean, it tends to be crumbly and
okay.
It depends where was it. Was it French or British or what was it?
It was in an Irish restaurant.
Oh yeah, it was a black pudding.
Yes.
And they do tend to hammer them, and they can be a little bland. They're usually made with grain and blood and a lot of fat. Yeah. And they can, I've had really great black pudding, and I've had very black pudding. I mean, black pudding is common enough that if you go to a supermarket in Britain, you can buy it, and it won't be great. But But these are cool. They have pine nuts in them, and they're quite flavorful, and they're pretty good.
I would definitely give it a shot. All right.
Okay. I just really did it because they're metal,
Oh, God.
So
No, that's the most metal food of all, blood pudding.
It really is.
We'll be right back after a word from our sponsors.
Fourth course, the song is King Buzzo, Housing Luxury Energy. And for all those who do know, King Buzzo is, of course, the lead actor from the Melvins.
Buzz Osborne.
Buzz, who are like, I'm sure everybody knows, like the greatest slow heavy, one of the greatest slowest heavy bands, like one of the original slow heavy bands.
Sludgy.
Like, sludge metal, like amazing. I saw a million years ago, and I remember it like it was yesterday.
I've never had a chance to see them live, but I'm hoping I get to when they come around sometime.
Between every single song, Buzz leaned into the mic and said in a low voice, "And now for another punk rock song." It was awesome. It was so much fun.
He's got the best sense of humor.
It's also incredibly hard to, seriously, it's really hard to play drums that slow. It just is. It's very impressive. Totally not kidding at all. So for them, this is a dish. This is the first dish that I've never made.
Okay.
Boiled ostrich.
I can see why that is not something you make a lot.
Yeah, totally got a guy. I've got an ostrich guy. I've got a camel guy. I've got a raw camel milk guy.
You've got an ostrich monger?
I do. The raw camel milk guy is, I think he's Pennsylvania Dutch. He's got camels. Very weird. Yeah.
I wasn't expecting that to be your guy.
I wasn't either. I'm like, this other guy told me, dude, I can get you raw camel milk. And I'm like, really? He said, yeah, it's a Pennsylvania Dutch guy. I'm like,
keep it down. Keep it down.
Totally weird. I can also get you fermented camel's milk, which is kumis, at the Uzbek market down in Brighton Beach, and it's better than the horse milk kumis.
Oh, I'm going to take it.
It's richer. I served it at the beer house. No joke.
Really?
I did.
Oh, my. I would have nothing to compare either one of those two. Horse.
Honestly, it's not that different from something like buttermilk, except it's extremely mildly alcoholic in theory. I mean, it's like 0.5%, like 0.5 ABV. I served it with Baijiu, which is the world's most popular booze, which starts around 110 proof, so 55% ABV.
Wow.
It's funny, Baijiu, everybody, it's actually the world's most popular distilled beverage, but they only drink it in China, and there's several people in China.
There's a couple, yeah. I hear they're growing.
But it's cool. There's actually Baijiu pits in China where it's actually, you literally put sorghum and millet usually in these pits you dig in the ground, and it's a dry ferment, and then steam it to get the alcohol off. And there are pits in China that they have been continuously fermenting Baijiu in for 1,000 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's totally cool. It ranges from kind of turpentine and weird to intensely barnyardy. I mean, it could be really this is like you distill a goat's ass. It tastes like this, but it's also kind of good. So, I mean, tequila.
So what's that saying about me?
Exactly. But it's cool.
So boiled ostrich is the
boiled
fourth
ostrich. It is actually it's not even a crazy recipe. It's a nice. It's not whole. It's you break down an ostrich and you boil it in a very kind of classical Roman. It's got herbs. It's got some spices. It's got some honey wine. Probably pretty good.
In something like that, are there typical herbs and spices that they would use? Like if somebody's making a stew, there's specific spices that you would use for a stew, almost regardless of what you make in it. Are there standard herbs and spices?
I think every culture has their little trinity. Like that's based, like French is very basic aromatics, which is like onion and carrot and celery. And then another culture might swap one of those out, like for red pepper instead of, or they might always have tomatoes, or, and you have these very common spice mixes like you see in, whether it's ancient Middle Eastern food or more modern, you're seeing cumin and caraway and, coriander. And coriander also refers to, like both the leaves of the plant and the seeds and everything. And you see these same kind of things come kind of over, like black pepper, cumin, caraway, it's like not at all uncommon, but like most cultures have some kind of grouping that they like. The cool one that I will get to in a second, but there's a whole riff on that.
Okay.
Like a lot of cultures have one or two that others don't. Like they might have, Szechuan pepper, for example, which is a very specific thing to Szechuan food. Although, the funny thing to remember about like food like Szechuan food is remember that like we think of hot peppers, which only came from Central America 400 years ago. It's not like they had. It's like before then they had tons. They had black pepper and they had Szechuan pepper, which isn't even really that hot. It's this weird thing.
I ate one once by accident. That wasn't pleasant.
Well, it's hot, but they're numbing and weird. I dig them, but you have you have to know they're coming. Also, it's just
you're a chef too.
It's true.
I'm a civilian.
But I'll get to an interesting one. So the next course. There's only that much stuff you can say about it. Also, I thought ostriches, like when I think of like the Melvins music, and I actually like the songs that have this weird string intro.
Yeah.
So I think that was cool about this song is I wasn't at all expecting the tone of it. It's low, but it's not Melvin-y. It's not, it's not heavy at all. It has this kind of odd sounding string intro, very tweaked, which is really nice. It's just a cool song, so I just liked it. And when I think of the Melvins, it occurred to me that an ostrich running in extreme, excruciating slow-mo would be a really wonderful metaphor for the way they sound. It's awkward and heavy and boom. You see those big weird bony feet going boom boom. And so it's so cool.
I never thought of it that way. That's really cool. Man.
All right, we're halfway.
Yes.
So fifth course, and I did want to think about people are we're probably halfway. We're still alive. That's good. That's something.
There's another course on the way.
Yeah. So this was The Lyre by Marriages.
Yeah. Anything Emma Ruth Rundle does, I love.
There's a very cool tonality to it. It's kind of atmospheric. It has this really nice kind of shuffle drum beat to it. nice. It's an interesting, nice song. I wasn't sure where it was going. I kind of really liked that as a place for it, and partially because of who's doing it and the name of the song and everything. I went with Spade Sows. A very popular dish among the ancient Romans.
Also popular in fast food places. I think I just saw that on a Wendy's menu.
I have actually seen that at like a 99 Ranch Market, believe it or not. I'm not sure it was spade, but I've definitely seen like pig uterus.
Oh, if it's not spade, I'm not eating it.
Well, they actually made a big point of this. They were like, they wanted one that had never born children. They wanted a virginal sow's womb.
Does that make a difference in taste?
It probably does, I'm going to say. The same way, like immature organs and stuff like that, a lot of organs, change as an animal gets older, particularly like reproductive organs are going to change. You think it's going to be, if it's had piglets, it's probably going to be like all stretched out or change. It probably have some more musculature and less.
Tougher.
I have no idea, frankly.
So this is like the veal of wombs.
Exactly. Okay. This is the veal of wombs. Okay. Yes, precisely.
Which is another metal as shit name.
It's really metal. I mean, come on. So, and this also used a lot of a spice called laser. It's also called silphium. And I feel like we talked about this once, but like this is the funny example. You can put it whichever episode you want. So laser was a spice that's interesting for a couple of reasons. It was so important to Roman cuisine. It was on coins, and it was the basis for the economy of certain like Roman principalities.
Wow.
And second of all, no one actually knows what it is because it is extinct. And
wow,
there's a lot of scholarly debate about what this plant actually does. We have some coins and a picture of, like roughly what it looks like. And it was probably the dried sap of the roots of this plant. And most importantly, it is probably related to asafoetida, or at least tasted similar, which is a spice that's like not used in Western cooking at all, but it's really common in Indian cooking. Okay. In fact, that funky, it's usually described as pungent, that very pungent, that's usually what I describe that, like you smell it, like I let people smell it and they're like, oh, I know that smell. It's like that Indian food smell. It's not any of the other spices you're familiar with. And lots of times people think like, oh, it must be some mix of spices. No, it's asafoetida.
Okay, so I think, I know what you're talking about, because there is a specific smell. When you go into an Indian restaurant, you know it's an Indian restaurant immediately.
Right, immediately. And that's probably the asafoetida, because other stuff, it could be Middle Eastern, it could be Moroccan. All those places have that same mix of like cumin and cinnamon and ginger, and that could be a lot of places, but like boom, asafoetida, now that's Indian,
right?
Or ancient Rome. So because it's listed as like, oh, if you can't get laser or silphium because it was fantastically expensive, you can use these other things as a substitute.
Okay.
So if you're thinking of like a specific flavor that you're going to see through lots of Roman cuisine, it's that. And it's interesting that it's so similar to like a specific kind, of Indian food today.
Yeah.
Like pakoras is like a really good example. It's like fried cabbage and potato patties that you get in Indian restaurants. Are very, very, like a very common snack.
Yes.
The funk of a pakora is asafoetida.
Oh, okay. Okay.
And a little goes a long way.
Yeah.
So now people are, they're really enjoying their Spade Sows womb. Their really attractive page is fanning them. They're looking forward to maybe some kinky page action later. They're thinking they might make it through this night. So I came to the sixth course, and I wanted to really confuse my diners. I wanted to shock them in a sense, and I went with Tamar Afek or Afek.
Yeah,
not sure.
Tamar Afek, yeah.
Russian Winter. For a couple of reasons. The first line is, I know I'm going to lose the war. And it's a great line. It's got a great drum beat. It's got a sick kind of like slightly distorted, that kind of farty distorted bass, which is really nice.
Yeah, that song just punches you in the face.
Yeah, it's really fun. It's a really awkward video.
Yes, it is.
It's like, they just really look confused, and it's a weird video, and
there's just something really weird and awkward about it, which is kind of charming in a strange way, but it's a good song. I liked it, and it's like a real change in tone. It's still kind of driving, it's kind of funky, but it's just a, and
it's not
compared to everything
at
else, not at all. And compared to everything else, like the lyric is really clear and in your face.
Yeah.
I know I'm gonna lose the war in the sea. I know how big the risk is taking you with me. I'll fight through Russian winter straight into your heart. You'll say you can see blood, but I plan to miss that part.
I made another dish that I've made a bunch in the cookbook. Shout out to me. Sorry.
Shout out yourself as much as you want.
Which is seafood croquettes. And they can be either boiled or fried. They're basically, I usually do these. You can do these kind of with any seafood. I usually do them with lobster and scallop. Okay. They're delicate. They're rich. They're delicious. They're basically, it's technically called like a mortararia, which we would call a force meat. And it's called a mortararia because it's made in a mortar and pestle. You grind it up in a mortar and pestle and you mix spices in there. It's funny. They have a bunch of like these other spices that are like, were very common then or not common now. Like the other, like when you think of the spices that are really common in Roman food, you get a lot of lovage, which is this very herbaceous kind of flavor, and rue, which ranges from like, oh, that's kind of bitter, to that's the most horrendous thing I've ever eaten in my life. Oh. Very, very popular among the ancient Romans. And it does, like rue leaves taste like bitter tea, kind of. Like if you're eating like Earl Grey tea, just about,
just
but
take
like
a handful of it.
Yeah, but I've also had it that is just like nail-bitingly bitter. Like you just horrendous. Oh, wow. So it's actually tricky to write that stuff into a recipe. I actually have to say, like, really taste it because, like, this could be really horrendous. But also, a little bit can go a really, really long way.
So this is definitely a to taste.
Exactly. Exactly. So it's weird. So like the sweetness of the shellfish, it gives it this real kind of bottom note, and they're really nice. It's not usually what we think of as like when we tend to do these kind of shellfish dishes today. They're much less herbaceous. We're much more going for like creamy and that kind of French heavy sauces, or like just like a lobster and cream. And as you're like you're like have a couple of high notes on it, not low notes. If you get like a lobster roll, it's like lobster and tarragon and chive and a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and lemon, and like a ton of lemon zest, and it's all high notes. Where this is all low notes, which is kind of weird to me.
That's interesting.
Yeah,
that's completely turned on its head from what I'm used to.
Yeah, they're really good, and I do this with cumin sauce for shellfish, which is a ton of lovage and tons of cumin with honey and a lot of vinegar. It's actually a really nice sauce. It's really earthy and nice, and it goes. I've served with oysters. It's a real winner, frankly.
Every time you say lovage, I get something completely different in my head.
Lovage, it's an herb that used to be very, very common up in probably till the 16th or 17th century. It's just, it's like the more globalization happens on a world scale, and you begin to have basil and mint and thyme, and thyme actually goes back really, really far. But like lovage, it's like you don't see it. It's pretty delicate. I would say it's something like Americans never use marjoram. French people love marjoram.
I have some of that in my spice cabinet, and I have no idea what to do with it.
Now nothing, because that stuff goes bad really fast. It's a really delicate spice to begin with, and like It's nice. It's, but it's not an assertive spice. It's not like something like rosemary, like, like it's very, very assertive, very powerful, goes with lots of stuff, goes with the meat really well. Marjoram is definitely like the top note to peas, and it's lovely for stuff like that,
Well, then
next time you're cooking some peas.
I will have to be throwing out I don't know how.
Use it. Cook it with some peas. See what happens. What's the worst that could happen?
That's true. Hey, it can't be any worse than what the diners of this meal are thinking right now.
Exactly. So, they really enjoy that. The Tamer affects playing. They're like, okay, this is cool, it's delicious. We're still probably gonna die, but that's it. So the swans.
The looming specter of death is still there.
Indeed. I have to go with swans.
Yes.
For the seventh course. And one song, Leaving Meaning, it's really long.
Yes.
It's really the swans. I saw the swans 1,000 years ago at like the crappiest venue. I saw them in like a crappy like hall at my college.
Oh,
and
wow.
they were so awesome. It was such a great show. And this is like so long ago, and it was like literally, this is not a cool venue. Like this is like, it was like a lecture hall, and it was just like, but they were great. I've always loved the Swans.
Oh yeah.
Or is it Swans? I don't know if it's Swans or the Swans, but it's very.
Yeah, I think it's just Swans.
Swans.
I don't think there's a definite article.
Yeah. I like it.
I got to try to get Michael back on and clarify that.
If he ever wants to come eat my food, tell him, come on down.
You got it. I will let him and Jarbo. I'll tell him. I have lucky enough to have them both on the show.
Oh man, that's amazing. So I like the fact that the song is really long, and it really gives our diners a time to really think about their mortality and where this is going.
See it, but not see it. I can feel it, but not keep it.
Good with that. There was a time when a certain kind of suicide was very accepted, and they would just you'd run a warm bath and slit your veins and just bleed out. And
nice.
It's kind of cool.
Yeah. Probably one of the better ways to do it, I guess.
I think. I don't know.
I've never tried it.
I'll tell you when I get there.
Let's try to finish this course first.
Indeed. So I went back and forth between two different courses for kind of obscure reasons. And I decided on the Epician dish because it's Epician. And so all these recipes come from Apicius, or De Culinaria, which is the oldest existing cookbook. And he was a gourmet of the time, and he collected these recipes, probably didn't create them so much as amass them.
Okay.
He was a wealthy Roman, and the Epician dish, I like it again because it's quite complex. It's a mixture of sow's belly again, fish, chicken, the breasts of fig peckers or thrushes, which are like small game birds, and it's basically a mince of various meats. Some eggs, again, pepper and lovage and broth and raisin wine. And then you basically make this mixture, cook it gently, and you sandwich it between thin pancakes like crepes. So I think of this as like a savory meal crepe. If you see those cakes that are made of a layer of crepes, those are really fun to make. But I was just like, I wanted to give a shout out to Apicius on the menu because, this is really, it's one of those cookbooks that, if you read it and you're a student of history, it changes. Like, it's a really easy way to realize well, like Romans really were genuinely sophisticated to an extent that we are today. They're not, it's like, it gives you a sense of the continuity of history, which is like incredibly important to me. I will say the other one that I went back and forth about was, I liked it because it was titled A Harmless Salad.
Oh.
And I thought it was funny for a couple reasons, because it comes from these ideas of humoral medicine where they were like, well, I mean, you can't eat lettuce. That's like deadly, man. Lettuce. Blood sausages are fine, but dude, lettuce will kill you. So it was a recipe designed to balance the humoral qualities of lettuce with like tons of ginger and rue, which is really, as I mentioned, incredibly bitter, and
but it's harmless,
and tons of pepper and honey and cumin and all this stuff, and you cook it in vinegar, and it's basically like a really cool salad dressing, but like all to ameliorate the dangers of these deadly raw vegetables.
Yeah.
And also the word harmless is inherently funny.
Oh yeah.
And it brings to me The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, because that book is fucking foundational. So I went back and forth, and I went with the Epician dish as a shout out, but I did want to mention the harmless salad, because it's cool.
Hey, I kind of want to look that up myself now. That's
harmless salad.
I actually wrote that down.
So for the 8th and penultimate course,
ooh.
And like, I think they knew it was penultimate. They were like, we're getting to the end here.
Winding
what's gonna happen?
Uh-oh.
So winding down or winding up? See, that's the problem.
That's a good point.
Medicine Boy, A Bag of Bones.
Yes.
I just think there's something about this song that has this feeling of a coming resolution.
I am the thorn sticking in your side. I am your self-destructive soul and pride. I am the blood sucked from the land. I am an unborn child, a sacrificial lamb. I am your ever-growing indignation. I am your pickpocket inspiration. And I'm big, so big, you see. Without you, there is no me. My bag of bones, bring your body on home. Sweetheart of stone, you've gone and left me all alone.
And it's like almost like there's a note to it. Like, I can't imagine people, particularly Romans, going, okay, we're probably going to die. And I'm just like, I'm okay with that. And it's my first real dessert course. And with the caveat that historically dessert wasn't a thing.
Oh,
like,
really?
Dessert didn't become a thing until like vastly later, and it emerged at different times in different cultures. But most cultures had sweet dishes, but there wasn't like a dessert course. There wasn't like you ended with sweet food. I mean, the honey wine that you begin with is extremely sweet. You would probably intersperse sweet and savory dishes throughout your meal. This is like very common through Western cooking until maybe the 18th or 19th centuries. It was just like, dessert wasn't like a thing. I think it was actually in the Middle East and Baghdad. I think they had more like sweets and puddings and faluda and zalabia and stuff at the end of a meal. But I could also be wrong about that, but I have a sense of that also because in those cookbooks, those things tend to occur at the end,
Yeah,
So there's actually a couple pretty good sweets in this cookbook, but this one it's a nut custard. It's an upside down nut custard.
Ooh.
It's a lot like think of it like a creme caramel.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So it's an egg custard with some, with honey and crushed nuts. And all that stuff goes on the bottom, and you cook it very gently, and then you flip it over and you unmold it from a little mold, and you pour honey on top and some pepper, because that's actually so many of these desserts you'll find finished with a pinch of pepper or a bit of pepper. And that sounds strange to us, but let's remember for a second, remember 15 years ago when salted caramel became a thing.
Yes.
And people thought that was crazy.
Yep.
You know, salt on a dessert, that's just crazy. And that's just so pedestrian now. Like, I mean, McDonald's has salted caramel something probably.
Oh, for sure.
Like,
probably salted caramel Spade Sows womb.
It's just like, you know, but it's like, I remember when that was first and people are like, this is great. And then they taste it like, this is amazing.
Yeah.
You know, so, you know, it's not that strange. A pinch of pepper on stuff. There's a lot of things like that seem strange when you look at a recipe. I mean, it's easy to forget how sweet barbecue is. Or like hot honey on fried chicken. Like, you know, these things are like, oh, and you're just, oh yeah, like chicken and waffles. Basically, I'm slathering it in maple syrup, and if it's me, it's red eye gravy because that's like liquid bacon.
Oh, I like a good red eye gravy. Oh man, you are speaking my language here.
So people are enjoying this delicate nut custard, and
there's a sense of acceptance of their possible fate.
There's one more course to go there, and I think the missioner would tell everyone, well, there's one more course to go. Please enjoy it. And for the next course, I went with Beth Jean's Houghton and the Hooves of Destiny.
Yes.
The Barely Skinny Bone Tree, which is very much sounds like an ethereal Irish folk song. I would say that's a fair description of it.
I would agree.
It's just lovely. It kind of feels like it goes on forever. Served an omelet of brains and rose petals.
Okay.
Because that's weird. That's just weird. I mean, the funny thing is, like, a brain omelet, I don't know if you ever had, like, they're actually not that uncommon. It's a very common way to eat brains. Brains are mostly fat. Like, I've made sausages out of them. There's a photo on my Instagram that everybody thinks is like, when you look at it, it looks like strawberry ice cream. I'm like, no, it's brains.
Okay. I've had sweetbreads, but that's
God, I love sweetbreads.
That's about the extent of my brain consumption.
Sweetbreads, it's a good. They look like brains. They're really disgusting to clean, frankly. Like, the first time you do it, like, you blanch it, the outer brain membrane gets really tight, and you peel it off your hands, and like then you like. I usually press sweetbreads under a weight overnight to get more moisture out, and people used to soak them in milk overnight to get the excess blood out. They're amazing, super unhealthy, super delicious. Sweetbreads are just great. So I would be serving you the brains and rose petals, just because it's like, that's just so weird. And also the rose petals harken back to the time I drowned everybody in rose petals, to get you thinking about that. And I would also serve it in my imperial roll with recipe number 69, titled merely Another Laxative.
Oh, okay.
So I would serve you those two things and send you on your way home, which will probably take you several hours and not end well. However,
not if you just had another laxative.
Precisely. So this also gives you a clue to the fact that at the end of the dinner from hell, Domitian gave all his guests presents and did not murder them and sent them home.
Wow.
And that was his idea of a really good joke.
That is an amazing... And the thing to keep in mind is that all of this is black.
It's all black. Your page is wearing black. There's dirgy music playing in the background. The food is all black.
That's just... Because as we're going through this, I'm trying to picture what each dish looked like, and I kind of forgot that it's just gonna come out.
They're all black. Yeah.
So I'm assuming all of these would be very exotic dishes at the time.
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, some not so much spice wine everybody would have,
Okay.
But yeah, but the thing is, it's like, the one thing about historical cuisine is like, it's generally, if there's a book about it, it's not for the middle classes. And a lot of these cultures didn't have middle classes,
That's a good point.
They had slaves and they had servants and they had, retainers and they, also just the fact, if you remember that throughout history, books were a real status item. I mean, this is 1600 years before printing presses, were invented.
Right,
so if you had books, that was a pretty big deal. So it's like, if you could afford, if you're being invited by the emperor, you're probably not the middle classes. But I mean,
right.
But by the same token, like, the funny thing is, this was a very cosmopolitan society, and there were like lots of food stands. And what's funny, when you look at a lot of the stuff that we would think of as like sweets or desserts, a lot of ones say like, "Oh, you can make this at home," because they're making a distinction between. Because normally you would just stop at the local sweet shop guy who's making. It's like most, it's like most a lot of countries today, right? They have markets, and lots of markets, have little stalls where each stall sells one or two things.
Right.
That's very much how Roman markets were. Like, there's a lot of people making like this delicious nut sweet, or making this one sweet, or making this kind of cookie, and you can come buy it. And so the recipes for sweets often say like, "Oh, you could make this at home."
That's awesome.
But yeah, I mean, if you're getting ostrich in Rome, that had to come from somewhere. And a lot of these, once again, like black pepper, if you're getting black pepper in Rome, that black pepper is coming from India. Probably, overland, or it's going overland to Egypt and then coming across the Mediterranean by boat. But then again, most of the flour to make bread in Rome came overland from Egypt by boat. So.
Wow. See, that's all. We don't think of that anymore. Yeah, it's just amazing. You just go down to the grocery store and pick up. But
then again, like, remember, it's like the spice, the black pepper that you get still came 2,000. It was not grown in anywhere here. It still came from India. It just came on a bigger boat, and it's like, and then your socks probably came from India on a boat.
Yeah.
We just think it very, and I mean, the Romans to some extent did too. Like, they were like, we are the center of a mighty cosmopolitan empire, and people in Britain, in Rome, Romans were getting black pepper from India.
Wow. Jeez.
That's crazy. I mean, that stuff blows my mind. It's like when you realize that, like, people were complaining in like Dalmatia about the quality of the stuff they were getting from China in 100 CE, and it's
always the quality of stuff from China.
I'm just using that as an example.
Oh man, this was awesome. I had so much fun with this.
I did too. It was a great idea. I really enjoyed doing the menu, man.
Oh, awesome. We'll have to come up with another one somehow. Figure something else out. Get a couple more people involved. Maybe.
Absolutely.
Maybe do some drinks with it. Where can people follow you and keep track of the cookbook in a couple of years when it comes out, and maybe stop by Edible History?
You can follow me on Instagram, Reifel, Jayreifel, Edible History on Instagram. Should know for Edible History NYC, but that's our like website.
I don't think there's a whole lot of Edible Histories on Instagram. I think there's that.
There is one other, and it's confusing, but like there,
I think it was a TV
look for
series.
The one with the weird stuff.
Yeah,
I'm the weird stuff. Yes, please, follow me, reach out to me, if people want to check out cool stuff, check out the cooking,
Oh, yeah. And check out the Time You Beat Bobby Flay, because I've watched that several times just because I like watching Bobby Flay get beaten. And it was a really cool episode. So thank you. Thank you again.
Thank you so much.
So
I had so much fun with this one, man.